everyone, and welcome. This is the third class, and this time I decided, and I thought it would be really beneficial to talk about some very common, yet sometimes underutilized cooking methods, cooking techniques. So today, what we're going to be doing is I'm going to be showing you 4 different ones that hopefully you'll think about when you're cooking, and realize that most of them are very easy to do. Number one, they involve they involve your stove, and there's a lot of wiggle room for how you do them and what you put onto them, and how you make a particular meal. The first one that I'm going to talk about is sheet pan cooking. And if you think, let's talk about a sheet pan. These are sheet pans. They are basically baking pans, and they have a rim on them, so that if you put food on, it's not going to fall off. Generally, they're used for baking, but you can use them for everything. And they go into the oven. The sheet pan cooking is a way of doing an entire meal. Vegetables, a protein if you want, or just all vegetables, in one place, cooking at a high temperature. So they're going to be cooking at 450. You have smaller pieces of food that can cook quickly. And for this general purposes, I'm going to be using some chicken pieces that you can buy already cut up with chicken, so you don't have to worry about what you can use thighs, you can use breast, you can use whatever you want, and some vegetables, and a little bit of some potatoes. So what I'm going to do is I think we're going to use the little one. I can show you how it goes. Generally, the vegetables go around the edge, meat goes in the middle. And I'm going to use some smaller pieces, actually maybe some breast, that will easily, you can, actually, I'm going to do a couple of legs, because I just want you to sort of get the whole idea of how this goes. And a couple of potatoes. You could use, the great thing about sheet pan cooking, if you think of sheet pan cooking as a one-pot meal, only instead of being on top of the stove, you're cooking it and in the oven, and you're basically baking. And what I'm going to do also is, when I get done cutting up a couple of these things, we are going to just drizzle everything, make it as simple as possible. Drizzle it with a little bit of olive oil, and then we'll put it in the oven. You can spice it any way you want, in other words, flavor it. I have a couple of blends. There's a chili blend. If you wanted to do nothing more than just use a little bit of oil and vinegar, and salt and pepper. You can make it as simple or as complicated as you want. And the olive oil is important. I'm just going to cut this down a little bit. I want it to be able to cook on the quicker side. So I'm opening those guys up so that they will cook a little faster. We're going to put some Brussels sprouts in there as well, because everybody seems to be loving roasted Brussels sprouts. And again, the simpler, the easier, the better. And again, I would cut them, trim them off a little bit at the end, because you want the pieces to be small enough so that they will cook quickly. And Brussels sprouts are one of those vegetables that get very crisp at a high heat. So what we're doing, what we're doing here is we are baking. You could be calling this baking. We're also roasting. Roasting is simply done at a higher temperature, which is at 450 and above, in the 400s and above. And the whole idea, again, is that it's a one-pot meal. So we're going to put a little olive oil. You could throw a little garlic in here. You could do any possible combination of protein, of vegetables, whatever your favorite things are. And those things are going to go into the oven in very short order. And they're going to cook for about probably 15 minutes or so. A little salt. Sometimes it's nice to start simple and you have, again, the ability to use whatever flavors you want to put into it. I have some fresh thyme. Why not? So a little thyme, a little roast along with these things. And a little pepper. And again, you could use herbs de Provence if you wanted it that kind of flavor. You could do some chili blend. We're going to use curry in the next segment. And that's pretty much it. So the vegetables are on the side, not generally the meat is not resting on it. And it's going to go into a preheated 450 oven. Okay, and the next technique, so that's a very easy technique. It's just high heat, roast, and you can put whatever vegetables, fruits, as I've said, proteins you want. If you use a larger sheet pan, obviously more. Sometimes a little trick so you don't have to spend a lot of time cleaning your pan, put down a layer of aluminum foil before you put all the food down. And that's as simple as it is. And so this should be done in about 15 minutes. The thighs were a little thick, that's why I cut them up or opened them up. And the next technique, method, which is a pretty foolproof way of cooking, is to poach. Now, when we think of poaching, we think of poached. You might have heard of a poached pear. You might have heard of some poached salmon. What it is cooking a particular ingredient, a protein or a fruit, or even a vegetable for that matter, in a simmering liquid. The liquid can be anything from wine to orange juice to water, which is what I'm using for in the segment that you'll see that we did ahead of time. And it's a great way to cook because it doesn't involve fat. So it's a kind of a foolproof way, and it keeps your food very moist. It also doesn't take a lot of time. So what is a simmer? The boil is when the bubbles are really going, hog wild. And a simmer is when you've turned it down, so it's just barely bubbling. And the recipe is extraordinarily simple. Basically, you'll see, it's a very simple recipe and something to learn how to maneuver. So, Erica, it's time to hit that button for the video. With chicken, generally, it's a great way to do it to make the stock, and I use water. So it's a much easier, you could throw a little bit of white wine in if you wanted to flavor it even more. And the other thing that is so terrific is that when we poach, it keeps the chicken or the ingredient quite moist. It's a simmer, which means it's not in that pan or pot, but there are very, very light bubbles that you will see. And in this case, the recipe is so easy that once the chicken is in the pot, it's to a boil, turn it and let it simmer for about 20 minutes, put the timer on, and 20 minutes are up, you take it off the heat and let it sit in its hot liquid for another 40 plus minutes. Generally we'll do it. And this is a 5-pound
chicken that I'm using today. And generally that should be pretty well, that really should be fine. I like to let it set in the liquid just a little bit longer just to be sure. And when it comes out, you'll see it's very, very moist and just a delicious. Anything else, we'll probably use a little bit of it in a stir fry. That you can use to put into a salad, anything you want, or just eat it that way too. Now, the seasoning piece of this is also very basic. For this particular one of poaching this chicken, I'm going to use literally celery, onion, carrot, some garlic. Everything just goes into the pot. A bay leaf to give it some flavor, salt and pepper. Now, if you were doing something where you wanted more of a different flavoring profile, you could use green onion, scallions, some ginger, some garlic, and that could go on to, you know, some sort of a Chinese salad or a flavor. But I like using these things to be very basic in terms of the flavorings, because then I have a great chicken that's cooked that doesn't have one flavor overpowering the other. As far as liquid, this is easily, I think, a little easier to do with smaller pieces of chicken. You could also do it with orange juice and rosemary. You can buy cut up chickens right now. Even in Trader Joe's has great package. They cut the chicken up. It's a whole chicken. And you could use pieces. The breasts, particularly, work very well in a saute pan that's covered with orange juice, some garlic, a little bit of fresh rosemary, and again, simmered. Doesn't have to cook that long. As you would with a whole chicken, but the idea is there. You understand that it's a very simple way and a very fat-free way of cooking. So I'm going to prep this, and then it's going to go into the pot, and we're going to turn it on, and there we are. We're going to wait and see. So, you know, you don't have to be perfect with your chopping of the celery and the onions, because they're all going to be, it's just for flavor. The chicken is a whole body. Always check to be sure that there's nothing in the cavities before you put whatever you're doing when you're doing a whole chicken. And why do I like to use a whole chicken? For me, it's a great buy, even though I'm rarely cooking for 2 people or 4. I like having the leftovers, and it's a great way to not have to use all of the parts and so forth of the chicken. And budget-wise, this was $2.99, that chicken, for an organic whole chicken, and buying parts, for example, $5.99 for breasts, skinned and boned. So there are a lot of ways that you can use the chicken that's already, a whole fryer. So I'm just smashing the garlic. I'm putting it in, and probably about a half of an onion, just coarsely chopped. You could put in some parsley. You could I'm going to put in just 1 bay leaf to give it a little flavor. Bay leaves are good, and the bay leaves have a good strong flavor, so you don't overdo them, because it's a subtle flavor, but it's a flavor that you can look for, and it gives a good flavor. That's all I can say. Flavor. And some salt and pepper. And the pepper is here. And we are going to use water. And you want the water to cover the chicken, and it's covered, because once we start cooking, it'll bounce back. It goes on high heat until it comes to a boil, And at that point, we are going to put the cover on and turn it to a simmer. And then I will set the timer for 20 minutes. And then it will, then we take it off the heat. So there we are. That's as simple as it is to do poached chicken. And you'll see very soon what the final product is. The other part of it is that you can also use the chicken. You don't have to skin the chicken at the beginning. I like cooking the chicken with the fat on, with the skin on. It can be easily removed after you cook. And here we are 40 minutes later. The chicken, just to remind you all what happened, that chicken, you put it in the pot, it was covered with water and some vegetables, very basic recipe. We bring it to a boil. The moment it starts to boil, it comes down to a simmer, it's covered, and set your timer for 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, take the pot off the fire and keep the top on and let it rest and sit in the liquid for another 40 minutes. So here we are. This is what it looks like. And it's this great, fabulous, almost like chicken soup. We've just about made chicken stock here. So I'm going to get it out of the liquid. And I would keep this. It smells great. It's a basic, you can use it for the liquid. You can use it for soup, a base. So here we go. This is what it looks like. The best way to get the fat, because we did leave the skin on, so the best way to get the fat off would be to just strain it so the vegetables aren't there and put this liquid into the refrigerator, and the fat will come to the top and you can scrape it right off. Now the other thing that we're going to do, just so that you can see, this is the back of the chicken. Once had someone ask me where with the back of the breast. And if we want to take the skin off, here it goes. You really just need to use your hands. Sometimes your hands do work the best. The skin comes off very, very easily. And, you know, it's best to let this rest a while so that you don't scald your hands as you're doing it. And there we are. Now, to cut it, we can cut it up. And here's the basic way to cut up a chicken, whether it's raw or whether it is cooked. So you start with the wings. I'm using kind of a big knife here, but it doesn't matter. And you will see that this, the meat is very, very, very well done, but it's very moist. The moistness of this, you don't have any dried out parts. And after you cut the wings off, you cut off the legs and the thigh. It all comes off in one big piece, which is really nice. You can pull it back, it'll come off very easily. And then you find the joint right here between the leg and the thigh. And that's how easy it is to cut up a chicken. It's a little more difficult sometimes when obviously you haven't had any experience with it, but see how moist this meat is. It's good. It's very, very good. The breast, back, part of the back. And what you're doing here is just cutting through so that you can take the back off. And then after you cut down and chopped up and done whatever you want to do with this chicken, after it's cooked, you know, here's just an easy way to cut it up. It can go into a stir fry. It can go into, once it's cold, You can cut it into your salad, anything. And the nice thing about using the basic recipe that we did was to give it flavor. But if I wanted to do a stir fry, which we're going to do, that stir fry can actually end up being now flavored. It's going to be a curry one, actually. So think about that for a minute. And that stir fry then the chicken that goes into it will be already cooked, number one, and it will pick up the flavors very easily of the curry and the other flavors that we're using. If you want to, you can make you can use the carcass again, put it back into the soup and sort of let it boil down again. It's got great flavors, and there'll be the meat that falls off if you don't want to mess around with it. But poaching, whether you use a piece, a breast that's already cut up, you don't have to do it in a big pot. You can do it on top of the stove. So there's numerous ways to get around poaching. We will be talking about that as well. So here we are. Actually, Erica, are there any questions that have popped up after all of this first half?
No questions yet.
No questions yet. Okay. So I mentioned, just as a little extra here, this is what the liquid looks like, and it's been in the refrigerator. So what's on top is the actual is the fat that has come to the top. And so all you have to do is basically scrape it off, and then you have fat-free beginnings for chicken broth or whatever. And I'm going to turn the timer off because I want to take a look at what's going on in our oven with our sheet pan. So it's cooking away. I had set the timer for 10 minutes. I'm going to set it for another another 5 minutes. Set the timer. Let's see. So what we're now going to do is show, we're going to make a stir fry. And most of us think of stir fry as generally ginger, it's flavored with kind of Asian flavored flavors. You know, soy and ginger and garlic and those kinds of things. But stir fry is really just a cooking method. It's a cooking technique. It's small pieces of food that are moved around very quickly in a wok, like this. And don't worry if you don't have a wok. The size of your, a skillet will work just as well. It's the technique. It's about moving food quickly on a relatively high heat so that the food gets evenly cooked, and that's really pretty quick. It's a very quick way of cooking. So I had mentioned earlier, we're gonna do, this is our poached chicken. And I'm gonna use some breast meat that I can use. We don't have to wait to cook it while we're cooking the vegetables. So this meat then becomes, having it pre-cooked, makes it a great last minute, throw it in if you need a protein to go in with your vegetables. So I'm just gonna cut it into some smaller bite-sized pieces. We're gonna put it with a little ginger and garlic and some curry powder. Why not? If you didn't want to use curry, again, the choices and the flavorings are all yours. This is about being a cook that you can say, okay, what's in my refrigerator? What do I have that I can put together for a very quick meal, very simply? I've got some vegetables. I can throw the vegetables, cut them up, which we're going to use some broccoli for color. We're going to use some red pepper.
a little bit of onion. Let's see. And we're just gonna, it doesn't matter, you can coarsely chop these things, just don't keep things in big chunks. So it's got a little bit of vegetable to it, flavors, a little bit of color. Don't need a lot. Remember, you can also, these things, it's the idea, you don't have to have a lot of something, just think color and texture, and you'll be on your way to making some good looking food that doesn't take you a whole long time to put together. I'm gonna chop up a little bit of garlic. I mentioned ginger. I'm actually just slicing the garlic. So we're going to cook the vegetables first because the chicken doesn't have to go in till the very end because it just really just needs to be warmed through. And again, remember, stir fry is just a technique. The flavors are yours to create and to, whatever you like and what your taste is. And little broccoli. And the smaller the pieces, again, these are pretty small, but they'll cook pretty quick. So I'm going to use a little bit of canola oil just as a flavor because it doesn't have, you could use olive oil if you wanted. A bit of the curry powder. Which seems like a lot, but once it gets going. And, just give it a quick mix. Now I did put in the chicken in here, so it's gonna, I didn't mean to have the chicken in here, but we're gonna do this so that you can see exactly what I was talking about, which means the vegetables have to cook first. And timer to stop. I'm gonna turn this off and let it rest in there. So this does happen, and if it does happen, it's not the end of the world. But I'm taking out most of the chicken because I want it to not cook with the vegetables because the vegetables take a little longer to cook. Heat your wok or skillet, whichever works best. And whatever you have. Don't run out and buy a wok if you don't have to. Just learn to use what you have available. But again, I'm going to use a little canola oil because for this particular curry piece, I don't want the flavor of olive oil on it. So as soon as you hear a sizzle, this is going to take a few seconds. And it's on high. So stir fry works best when you're cooking on high heat and you're constantly moving the food. It's really that simple. And again, the smaller the vegetable and the smaller the pieces, the faster it will cook.
And broccoli does take a little bit longer to cook. And sometimes it's easier to, you can add a little bit of, just a little bit of liquid, a little bit of water, or in this case, actually, because we do have some chicken stock, we could hasten this cooking process by just adding a little bit of liquid into the pan. But I want to get things rolling here and see how quickly it will. So this is what it's looking like. And as soon as it really starts, this heat really gets going, is when we start moving it out.
I don't know if you already went through this, but are there any other oils that you would
I'm sorry?
Are there any other oils you would suggest to have like a high
The high heat. I've been using at home, I have rice bran oil, which has a very high heat. It's what tempura, with Japanese restaurants use a lot for their tempura. It's not oily. It's worth looking for and using. Avocado oil is another high heat. So you can see, this is what we're up to. We're basically cooking quickly. This is how it goes. And when you're in a flat skillet, you don't want to overstuff the skillet. I'm going to put a little tiny bit of broth in here. Do this without making it easy. And I did that because it was starting to stick and I really didn't want to put in more oil. And because we're using chicken, the chicken broth will also enhance the flavor of this whole dish. Which is, as you can see, this is a creative, last-minute dish. Again, it's yours to make your flavors, your favorite tastes. So, I forgot the ginger, actually. We were talking about ginger. So ginger root, fresh ginger, you can scrape off the skin. I sometimes just cook with it. It doesn't matter. We're not using a lot. But it's enough to give some good flavor. And it smells really good as well. And again, this heat is on high, but as it's cooking down, the liquid also, will evaporate, and you can have it with liquid still in it. Serve it with rice. Serve it plain. I think what we're also realizing, or a couple of these dishes are basically one meal in a particular pot. You're not using a whole lot of different pots and pans to create a dinner here. You've got things that you have available. You've cooked the chicken ahead. You've done your vegetables. Could be, again, this could be a stir fry having no protein in it at all, or tofu. Anything. The combinations of what we're doing here with these cooking methods and techniques are the availability of what you have on hand that you can make just about anything, anytime, quickly.
Marcie, we actually have a question.
Yeah.
So the question is it true olive oil is not preferable to heat the pan/wok?
Well, it depends what I would think. If I were doing ginger, garlic, scallions, soy sauce, those kinds of flavors, I would not use olive oil. And olive oil, because it does not have the higher heat point, is not that favorable, but if you were going to use different flavorings, if you were using, you know, fresh herbs or something, basil and gin and garlic and more standard Mediterranean thinking just for the cooking, then, you know, it would be a little bit different. So olive oil just doesn't have, it burns off at about, what is it, Erica, on my moment, 350, 400. It's not the best for high heat. It's not the worst.
Yeah, the smoke point is lower than something like a canola oil. So yeah, at a high heat, it might smoke. So it's more likely to smoke. Yeah,
It disintegrates.
it's preferable to use things like you were talking about, the rice bran, canola oil, avocado oil.
So I've just put in the chicken just to warm it through. I'm going to take a little taste to see what possibly, I didn't use any salt or pepper. So that's good. Not a lot of curry that's in your face. It's good. Some might want to put more salt and pepper. And our broccoli is just at the crunchy part. But again, you can't let stir fry just sit in a pan. You have to, it's an active cooking technique. And don't forget, things do cook after you turn the heat off. So be aware that, you know, you might think that it's not done, but once you turn the heat off and before you get to serving it, it's still cooking through. So let's get that into a little bowl. Clean bowl. So you can see there's a little bit of juice. That adding a little bit of the chicken stock that we made from the poached chicken was really good. That's why it's nice to have stock around, because it adds flavor when you, instead of adding water. Smells good, tastes good, and it's very, very simple.
It looks good.
And I'm going to take a look at what's going on in the oven, because I turned the oven off, so the chicken should be cooking and should be finished. Let's go here. Clean this up for one little second here. Get ourselves organized. Okay. So here you go. I just put that in and didn't even move it around. And you know, so you've got the potatoes and everything have gotten crisp. The Brussels sprouts are cooked. The chicken is definitely cooked. And that's why I opened up. I split the legs down because I wanted them to, they take longer generally, but you can see it's cooked through. Another one pot meal, very simply done. That was 15 minutes in the oven at 450. So lots of combinations for doing sheet pan cooking. All vegetables, again, how you season it, it's all up to you. But it's a great, again, one pot, easy to do, whatever you have on hand. The very last thing I want to show you is broilers, a broiler. And many of us forget what a broiler, that it even exists in our oven. And it's the part where the heat cooks from the top. If you think of it as, you know, a barbecue reversed, that would be a nice way to think about it. When you put something on the grill, it's cooking from the bottom. This is cooking with the heat on the top. And you can, what I did here, this is your grill. A broiler pan. Just about every oven has one. You may not have ever known what to do with it. Lots of people, it's common. Put a piece of tin foil or aluminum foil underneath so you don't have to kill yourself cleaning it. The food goes on top. These are some chicken thighs that were boned and skinned. And again, should cook pretty quickly, that I've had marinating here just with a little bit of olive oil and some lemon and some rosemary, just to give it a little bit of extra flavor. And I think we have time to at least try to do this. The glasses business. Start. Nope. So, Erica, while that's cooking, there we are. Any questions?
All right, let's wait a couple seconds, see if anyone has any questions, and then I'll go into the nutrition discussion.
Okay.
Well, all of this looks really good. I'm very excited to share, especially the poached chicken, with my family and see if we can figure out a way to make a poached chicken at home.
And you know, don't forget, I use a whole chicken. Poaching could be done in a skillet such as this, because it's a small, but you can poach fish. So and it's a variation of what you would also do in a microwave. Many of us have microwaves, they use them all the time. So if you don't have to be on the stove. Again, a microwave, you can do a piece of fish even on a plate or in a bowl with a tiny bit of wine or anything else you want to, another liquid, but a little bit covered and goes into, cook at your, however your microwave instructions tell you. So, and poaching again, it doesn't have to be a whole chicken. It can be pieces. It can be, peaches are coming into season right now, nectarines. In the winter, the pears, we always hear about poached pears. And the poached pears, again, they're just done in a deeper saucepan. The liquid generally can be wine or water or a mix with a little bit of flavor, sometimes cinnamon. That's for poaching fruit. It's the technique. So again, you're not boiling the liquid. You're just letting it simmer, and it's at a simmer, and then it can rest in the liquid. So lots of ways to do it.
Thank you. That's awesome. That's great. So I'm going to go ahead and go into the nutrition discussion while the broiler chicken is cooking. Today, we are going to talk a little bit about sodium, which is really appropriate specifically for this class, especially because Marcie made that beautiful broth, and that's a really great way to cut back on your sodium. And you made so many versions of chicken, and that's a really great way to kind of stretch and figure out how to cook for yourself, which is another great way for you reducing your sodium intake throughout the day. First off, in the U.S., Americans are consuming more sodium than is recommended. So Americans on average are consuming about 2,300 milligrams of sodium a day, which is about a teaspoon, so not very much at all. And the overconsumption of sodium can lead to diseases such as hypertension or high blood pressure, heart disease, stroke, and can have some negative effect on bones, specifically because the sodium and calcium meet together and it's excreted in your urine. So it can really have a negative effect on your bone health. So you know that salt contains sodium, but the salt that you add to food or while you cook is not the primary source of sodium for most Americans. In fact, the main contributors to sodium intake in the American diet mostly comes from processed restaurant prepared food. Sodium in processed foods can be added to preservatives and salt, and in foods that, in many cases, foods that contain sodium are not salty. Take, for example, bread. Bread has been identified by the CDC as one of Americans' primary sources for sodium intake. However, when you consume bread, is it really salty? So although understanding how much sodium to eat and the sources of sodium can be overwhelming, there are simple strategies you can employ to curb your sodium intake. One of the first strategies you can use is to cook, and like Marcie was doing today, all those different ways she was cooking. When you cook, you're able to see how much salt that you're adding to dishes. Additionally, you can use more herbs and spices. I really encourage you to look up different herbs and spices that when you combine, create really great flavor profiles. So Marcie was talking a little bit about using ginger and garlic, and that's a really great kind of base for things like curries and other Asian dishes as well. Another thing you can do is dilute or limit foods high in sodium. For instance, add water, herbs and spices, or vegetables to canned soups, or reduce the portion sizes for snacks. And another thing you can do lastly is to read labels. So one of the rules is called a 520 rule. It's a simple way you can figure out if a food product is healthful or not. And the 520 rule here is as follows. 5 stands for 5%, and 5% should apply to nutrients like sodium, cholesterol, saturated fat, and added sugar. As an example, we're gonna look at the back of this can of beans. Now you can see the red arrows that represents the saturated fat, cholesterol, sodium, and added sugar. So you can see for the saturated fat and the cholesterol, that's 0%, the sodium is 4%, and the added sugar is 0%. Now we're gonna go back to the 20%. So the 20% stands for fiber, vitamins, and minerals. And let's look back at the can again. You can see that for fiber, that's 32% of your daily recommended intake, which is excellent. It's a very high source of fiber. However, when you look at the percentages of other nutrients, they're relatively low. They're good, they're okay, but they're relatively low. And let's look at specifically calcium. So if you really want to beef up your calcium intake for this particular meal, if you're having black beans, you can add something like collard greens or kale. Those are two particular leafy green vegetables that have calcium, but also don't have a nutrient within the leafy green vegetables that would prevent calcium absorption. So in general, this can of beans is healthful according to the 520 rule. So that is it for the nutrition section of this meal. If you guys have any questions, please let me know. And Marcie, yeah.
When I've been using soy sauce, even the low sodium, a lot of times because what I want is just the flavor, but not a real punch in the face. So I will dilute even low sodium soy sauce just to give me the flavor. And over the years, that's what I've done many times, and you begin to realize how salty soy sauce is. And I just so that's on the sodium piece, and our broiled chicken has just gotten finished, and so
great, perfect timing.
yeah.
Yeah, and just to jump off of Marcie, your won't kind of register a 25% change in sodium. So if you dilute it bit by bit, you won't be able to really notice that change. So you can do things like dilute soy sauce and dilute soups a little bit by a little bit, and that would be really helpful to kind of.
So this is what it looks like. Quite warm. And I turned them over, and the dark part is because we use thighs. and it cooks really, really quickly. This is a great way to put color on top of, roasted vegetable, last minute cooking. The thing with broiling, do not walk away from your kitchen when you have your broiler on, because it cooks very quickly. This heat came down from the top. Your broiler pan is generally near the top, and if you walk away, you will likely find a lot of smoke happening in your kitchen, and you really don't want that. So, because foods cook so quickly. So there you are. I've enjoyed this.
Yeah. This has been great. This has been great. Thank you so much for different, all these different ways to cook chicken, and how to flip them in different ways. In different ways. This has been really great. So yeah, I guess, yeah, we don't have any questions on the side. So with that being said, I'm just gonna remind students to please, I have the link to the questionnaires in the chat box. So it's voluntary to take the questionnaires, but we do invite you to take them. The 3 questionnaires, they take about 5 minutes each, but we really appreciate your feedback. It'll really help us with programming in the future, and making sure that other students have an opportunity for classes such as Marcie, so these really, really great resources. So we really appreciate that. And Marcie, do you have any words? We really appreciate you like sharing your knowledge with us. This has been so great.
Well, I will only finish with saying, being in the kitchen, it shouldn't be a tedious thing. I mean, food is, we know we all need food. We want to have some good food. And I hope that I've showed you easy, fast ways to think about putting together food in some cooking techniques that really you should be able to go forward with forever. Because some of the questions that I had seen early on were that, the food, my cooking is boring, I don't know what to do next, and so forth. So hopefully these classes have given you license to be creative and some different ways to approach some cooking your food quickly, easily, and that your family can have some good times with too.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And without further ado, I guess we'll hopefully see you another time.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, guys. Thanks.
Bye.